In the basketball world, Caitlin Clark is a name that ignites excitement, both for her undeniable skills on the court and her unapologetically bold personality. Standing out not only because of her statistics but also because of her fiery style, Clark has the kind of game that keeps fans at the edge of their seats, and her attitude makes her equally fascinating off the court. But beyond her athletic prowess, another figure has been catching the attention of fans and analysts alike, her new coach, Stephanie White. When Clark recently opened up about her perspective on White, it provided an intriguing look into the dynamic between an ambitious young star and a seasoned coach who knows a thing or two about the highs and lows of basketball. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Clark and White are two powerhouse figures in women's basketball, though their paths to the spotlight have been quite different. Clark, with her natural intensity and competitive edge, has made her mark as a player who thrives on challenge. She approaches every game as though it's her last, leaving no room for second-guessing or caution. Her energy to many feels almost raw, like she's harnessing some deep force that propels her to the hoop. Whether that means shooting a three-pointer from half-court or going head-to-head with opponents much taller and physically imposing. Meanwhile, White brings a level of maturity to the game that only comes with years of experience as both a player and a coach. Having played in the WNBA and then moved on to coaching, she's seen the game evolve over time and understands the kind of discipline and strategy that it takes to succeed. When Clark shared her thoughts on White, there was a hint of admiration layered with the kind of skepticism any young, highly driven athlete might have toward authority. This isn't because she doubts White's abilities. Clark, more than anyone, respects talent and skill. Rather, it's that she's protective of her style, the way she attacks the game, relentless and sometimes chaotic. White, on the other hand, has a more methodical approach, emphasizing the importance of consistency defense and playing the long game. Clark's reflections suggested she's aware of these differences, perhaps even appreciating them, but there's an underlying sense of curiosity about whether their philosophies will mesh as the season progresses. The humor in their interaction lies in how both Clark and White are so committed to their distinct views on basketball. Clark, the young, intense sharpshooter, is all about pushing boundaries and taking big risks. She's the kind of player who sees an impossible shot and thinks, why not? In her eyes, basketball is an art, and she's the painter wielding every shot as her brushstroke. White, however, is more like the museum curator. She values the craft, but she wants things to stay within the lines. It's an amusing contrast, seeing them interact, especially since both are fully aware of their differences, but unwilling to concede entirely to the other's perspective. Clark's initial impression of White, by her own admission, was that of a no-nonsense figure. White has a reputation for being all business, someone who cuts straight to the core of what's needed without much small talk. Clark, known for her sometimes cocky on-court demeanor, had to adjust to White's direct style, and it didn't take long for her to realize that White doesn't back down easily. If anything, White's firmness has brought out a new side of Clark, one that respects strength in a leader but still wants to assert her independence. Despite the occasional tension, it's clear that both Clark and White share a mutual respect for each other's contributions. White acknowledges Clark's passion and sees potential in her aggressive style, even if it sometimes flies in the face of her own approach. She's the kind of coach who knows when to let a player shine and when to pull them back, a quality Clark appreciates, though she may never admit it openly. When Clark talked about White, she seemed to recognize that, as much as she might resist structured coaching, White's experience could be the very thing that sharpens her game. Clark's humor also shines through in how she describes their practices. She joked that White's drills feel like they're designed to keep her in line, as though White knew exactly where Clark's weaknesses lay and was ready to expose them. For Clark, it was a humbling experience. She's used to coaches who let her roam free, but White has a knack for identifying the little gaps in her technique. One story Clark shared was about a practice where she repeatedly tried a long-range three-pointer during a drill, only for White to calmly point out her missed opportunities for an easier pass. It's a testament to Clark's audacity that she still tried again, and her amusement at White's gentle, almost maternal correction suggests a kind of budding camaraderie. There's a certain irony in how White and Clark approach each other on the court. Clark, who usually exudes confidence, seems to recognize a challenge in White. In a way, White represents the kind of authority Clark has always been wary of but secretly respects. White's coaching philosophy is rooted in the long-term view, focusing on how each decision in a game impacts not only the present but the future. She pushes her players to think about consequences, which is something Clarke is still learning to incorporate into her game. From White's perspective, Clarke is both an asset and a challenge. White has coached many talented players, but there's something undeniably refreshing about Clarke's candid approach. Clarke isn't afraid to speak her mind, even if it means occasionally clashing with White. This kind of relationship can be tricky to manage, but White seems to have found a way to balance Clarke's intensity with her own steadying influence. She knows that Clarke is a firecracker, and rather than trying to dampen that, she seems intent on showing Clarke how to channel it effectively. The dynamic between them becomes even more compelling when you consider their backgrounds. Clarke has always been a natural talent, but her confidence often verges on cockiness, which some find charming while others see it as reckless. White, on the other hand, built her reputation through years of hard work, grinding away in the NBA before stepping into a coaching role. She understands the stakes and the sacrifices necessary to stay at the top of the game, and she wants her players to understand that too. While some fans might have expected friction between them, there's a sense that their differences are more complementary than conflicting. Clarke's comments about White reflect this duality. She doesn't shy away from acknowledging that White's experience brings a layer of depth to the game she hadn't fully appreciated before. At the same time, she still hints at her reluctance to abandon her own instincts, as if to say, "I'll listen, but don't expect me to stop taking risks." Clarke's admiration for White's tactical knowledge is evident, though she won't admit to being entirely swayed by it. White has a way of breaking down the game that makes Clarke pause and think, a feat in itself for a player who usually goes with her gut. White's influence has already been noticeable in Clarke's game. There's a bit more patience, a little more calculation behind each move. But true to form, Clarke manages to keep her rebellious edge, occasionally going for those daring shots that White might have advised against. One of the more interesting aspects of their relationship is how they handle game time. Clarke is known for her high-energy style, which often results in fouls or missed shots, but White sees this as something she can refine rather than suppress. During a recent game, Clarke went for a wild, contested shot that didn't land. As she walked back to the bench, she could see White's subtle smile, as if to say, "I saw that coming." It's in moments like these that Clarke seems to appreciate White's perspective, not as a limitation but as a challenge to elevate her own game. As Clarke continues to develop under White's guidance, fans are starting to notice the subtle changes. Clarke's game hasn't lost its spark, but there's a new layer of thoughtfulness there, as though she's taking White's words to heart, even if she doesn't always act on them immediately. The two of them seem to have reached an unspoken agreement. Clarke will bring the fire, and White will make sure it doesn't burn out of control. This balance between structure and freedom has become a defining feature of their partnership, and it's something both of them seem to value deeply. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.